Hi everybody, welcome back into the Colored Gemstone Academy. I am Paul Deasy, your instructor, and this is my YouTube channel, Paul Deasy Gemstones. Well, along the lines of the YouTube channel, I've heard from a couple of people that said they don't do YouTube, but they do Rumble, which is an alternative platform, and vice versa. So I'm going to start moving some of these things over to Rumble as well. So I'll be available now both on YouTube and on Rumble, and they're both going to be under the name Paul Deasy Gemstones. Well, this lesson is episode 76, and it happens to be on Amazonite. Before I get too far on that, I know that some people say Amazonite, some people say Amazonite. Well, it's always been a little bit of a pet peeve for me, because I always, when I get any of those kind of words where people say it two different ways, I go to the root word, and the root word is Amazon. And so I don't know where you shop on the internet, but I sometimes shop on Amazon.com. I don't go to Amazon.com. Same thing when I think about the second longest river in the world. I think of the Amazon River, not the Amazon River. But I digress. It's just one of my little pet peeves. But this was by request from a subscriber by the name of Ernesto Romero. More on that later, because I'm going to talk about why he specifically requested this. But I'm really kind of surprised I hadn't done one before this, because Amazonite is a very beautiful and pretty much a readily available gemstone. Sometimes it can look a little bit like turquoise, like a greenish turquoise. Sometimes it's like a bluish green, where it looks almost like a blue turquoise or a translucent jade at times. So it really is a beautiful stone, and it's not really all that expensive. Basically, feldspars are a group of rock-forming aluminum tectosilicate minerals containing sodium, calcium, potassium, or barium. Feldspars make up about 60% of the Earth's crust, and about 41% of the Earth's continental crust by weight. So when you think about the crust, the outer layer of the Earth, that's where a lot of these rocks and minerals come from. Think about feldspars making up about 60% of the Earth's crust, so you know why I say it's readily available. Speaking of crust, what's with people that had their crust cut off of their peanut butter and jelly sandwiches when they were little? I don't know if that happened to you, but I always find that really weird and demanding in a way, but I digress. Okay, let's get a little bit into the vital statistics of this gemstone. Again, this is where we talk about the chemical composition and how it compares to other gems. It's basically how you identify what it is. It is a potassium-rich silicate. So you have potassium, you have silicone, you have oxygen, all of these molecules, and it is a potassium-rich member of the feldspar group, which we talked about a little bit earlier. What is a crystal structure? Every gemstone has a specific crystal structure, if it does have a crystalline form at all, and in this case it is called triclinic. It is a green to a blue-green color. I talked about that in the open. It can sometimes resemble turquoise, sometimes resemble jade in the blue to blue-green colors. Its transparency, remember I talked about this in an earlier lesson on clarity. I said there's gems that are translucent, transparent, and gems that are opaque. Transparent means that you can see right through them. Translucent means some light passes through, and then opaque means no light passes through that, like a brick wall. So in this case, your Amazonite can be either translucent or it can be opaque, and you'll see both varieties in some of the images that I'm going to show you. Mohs scale of hardness. We talk about the Mohs scale of hardness as basically how vulnerable is that gem to scratching, and specifically means what gem can scratch another gem. That's how that whole scale was born. Well, this is a 6 to 6.5 on that Mohs scale of hardness, but given in the company of like an opal or a turquoise, but not quite a quartz. Quartz is 7. but pretty good for wearing every single day. Now we get into that toughness scale, that sometimes called tenacity, the toughness scale. That's the ability for that gem to withstand breaking and cracking altogether. And in this case, it's rated brittle. What does it mean that it's brittle? I'll get more onto that later with some examples of what it is. But can it be worn every single day? Absolutely. And I'll talk about ways to protect that investment in the future too. Okay, so refractive index. Remember, the refractive index is a measurement of the visible sparkle of that gem. When we think of a diamond, it is 2.42, I think, on the refractive index. Sparkles very, very much. In this, not so much, 1.52 to 1.53, not a lot of sparkle, but we don't buy Amazonite for the sparkle. We buy it for the color, the beauty, and the luster, and this can have quite a great, beautiful luster to it as well. And finally, we talk about the specific gravity. I refer to that as the heft of that gemstone. How heavy does it feel compared to its size? What's the density of that? Well, this would be a 2.6 to a 2.8 to put that into perspective for you. Something really, really dense would be a hematite. I also love to give you the example of sapphire and rubies are 4 on the specific gravity, and this is a 2.6 to 2.8. Certainly not the heaviest, but certainly not the lightest either. Now, where is it found? You already said it's not found on the Amazon River. It can be found in the United States. There's some good deposits throughout the United States. Afghanistan, and the great land down under of Australia produces some. Brazil, which is rich in so many gems, you can find Amazonite in Brazil. Canada, also China. China, again, a great land mass. If you look at where a lot of gems are mined in the United States and what the latitude is, it carries over to this very similar gems being mined in China at that same latitude. Ethiopia, Madagascar, another very smaller but very rich country in gemstones. Namibia, Norway, Russia, and Sweden. Those are all places that you can find the Amazonite. Now, let's go back to what I said at the very beginning. The Feldspar group encompasses about 60% of the Earth's crust, the outer layer of the Earth. So yeah, it's found in a lot of different places. Okay, so now let's get back to that comment about the stone being brittle. Okay, what makes it brittle? It is because it has perfect cleavage. No, not that kind of cleavage you're seeing on your screen. Get your mind out of the gutter. But cleavage, when we talk about gemstones, it really means that it can easily be cleaved on a certain axis or a certain plane of the gemstone. Let me put this into other things that you can understand. People don't realize, we always talk about diamonds as being the hardest gem on planet Earth. Yeah, but it's not the toughest. In fact, you hit the diamond in the right place and you can cleave off a whole face of that diamond. The same is true of the Amazonite. In fact, when we talk about that perfect cleavage that it has, that means there are two different axes or planes where it can just break at that point very, very easily. So what does that mean to you, and how should you wear your Amazonite? My recommendation is don't worry too much about the fact that it has that perfect cleavage and can be brittle. How do you handle that? Well, when you're getting a piece made, and most of the pieces that are made are set in a bezel. So that's that little flat silver or gold that goes around the stone, usually in a cabochon, rather than putting it in a prong setting, which sits a little bit higher and is prone to hit more things. If you really pay attention to those very simple things, you can wear your Amazonite for a lifetime and enjoy it. But just beware that if you see it in a prong setting, you might want to ask your jeweler, hey, could you put this in a bezel setting? It'll just protect that stone a little bit better. Let me think. Okay, Amazon, as I said before, is something you shouldn't really have to spend a great deal of money First of all, most of the opaques in particular are going to be really, really reasonable, can look a little bit like turquoise as I mentioned. But if you get the pieces that are more highly translucent, where visible light can pass through very easily, you're going to pay a little bit more for that material, but it's still really not out of sight because, as I said, it's relatively available. Okay, now let me get back to, I said this was a request to do this lesson from Ernesto. It was Ernesto, right? Yeah. He asked if I could do a lesson on Amazonite, and specifically, is it radioactive or is it toxic in some way? In other words, is it safe to wear this stone? Absolutely, it is safe to wear the stone. From time to time when I'm studying certain minerals, and I think that one of them was the bumblebee jasper, and I forget what the toxic element in it was, but it was more of a question of if you were cutting it, you're a lapidary and you're cutting that bumblebee jasper and you inhaled some of the fumes from it, that could be toxic. That's why they always wear masks when they're working with any gemstones. That was even before COVID. Or something like marcasite. Like I did a lesson for you guys on marcasite. And I said that actually what you're wearing isn't marcasite. It's something that evolves or devolved into something called white iron pyrite. Because marcasite itself, when it comes in contact with water and air, can create a sulfuric acid. That's no fun to breathe. So it's a great question about the toxicity of gemstones, because sometimes you can hear some things. Well, there's a great gem site that I will put on the screen for you. It is called classicgems.net. And if you go to there and you go to their homepage, you can learn about a lot of gems, but you can look at something, I'll show you a picture of that too, radioactive gems. And what it does is it rates a whole bunch of gems in their radioactivity. Now, a lot of things can have radioactive signals. The question is, are they harmful or are they not? So what they do is in this section, they talk about what's the level of radiation in different gemstones. And they rate it from very strong to weak to mild and barely detectable. And if you take a look at the entire range of those gems on that website and you come to the Amazonite, it is a very, very low level of radiation. So even the dogs are really excited about this lesson. Okay, so the upside of doing these lessons outside, it's beautiful. The weather's nice here in Naples, Florida. You can see the little golf course behind me. The downside is sometimes you get the barking dog, but I think the dog is done now. I was talking about the toxicity or the level of radioactivity in there, and I talked about the different levels. When you get to the Amazonite, you will see that it is in that barely detectable range. There is no danger to you whatsoever, and that most of that radioactive signal comes from the element of potassium, and I said that this was a potassium rich. But no, you don't have to worry about glowing when you wear it. It is completely safe to wear. Well, I hope that answered Ernesto's or perhaps some of your questions. Remember, if you have not yet subscribed to my channel, please hit that subscribe button on either YouTube or on Rumble. And I will be back next week with another lesson on the Colored Gemstone Academy. Thank you so much for watching. Bye-bye, everybody.